You're becoming a real programmer now. Remember, in the previous video we created 3 NPCs, but we did it by copying the line and pasting it in 2 more times. In this video we'll look at methods to loop through the code. The most common method is to use for. To code along, open index.html from the start lecture 2_7 folder. You might be surprised to see this is where you got to in the previous video. I want you to delete 2 of the NPC's push lines. Now before the remaining NPC's push line, add for, then brackets, followed by an opening curly brace, and with the closing curly brace after the NPC's.push line. So far so good. But if you try and run it now, you'll get an unexpected token error. That's because we're expected to enter something in the brackets. What we enter for a for statement is positively weird. Rather than a typical set of parameters that you pass to a function separated by commas, instead we enter 3 JavaScript statements. As such, they're separated by semicolons, just like you should end every JavaScript statement line. You enter 3 statements, and each one, in order, has a different purpose. The first is executed just once, before we run the code inside the curly braces. The second statement is a condition. While it evaluates to true, the loop will repeat. The final, the third statement, is executed every loop after the code inside the curly braces has run. So what do we enter to cause the code block inside the curly braces to be executed 10 times, creating 10 NPCs? First we define an index variable. We use let, not const, because we're going to be updating this variable. The second statement is a condition. We want to check if I is less than 10. Finally, we want to add 1 to the variable I each time the code block executes. JavaScript has a shortcut method for adding 1 to a number. We use plus plus. You might have seen there's a programming language called C++, and this is meant to indicate that it is the next iteration of the C programming language. Let's go over that again. This code means create a variable called I that's initialized to 0. We test if I is less than 10. It is, so the code inside the curly braces is executed. Then the final statement in the for definition is executed. Now I equals 1. The processor checks if I is less than 10. It is. We run the code inside the curly braces and then add 1 to I. I now equals 2, and we repeat until I equals 10. That's not less than 10, so we jump out of the for loop. If we save and visit start lecture 2_7 and enter npcs.length, the response is 10. Great work! While a for loop like this is perhaps the most common form for looping, there are other options. We can refactor the loop using while. First we define the loop variable, commonly called I for iterator, then we enter while. While has a condition in brackets, and we can enter I less than 10. Then curly braces and the NPC's.push line, then I++. If you forget to include I++, the while loop will loop forever. Because of this, while loops can be dangerous. A while loop that loops forever can bring your web page to a grinding halt. Beware! As well as using for with 3 statements, we can use for in to access the properties of an object. Let's create a variable that accesses NPC0. Then we'll add a little console message. Then we enter for and create a new variable prop followed by in NPC. Whatever we put in the code block will now repeat with prop equal to the property names in the object NPC. We can print this to the console using the log method. We use both the prop name and the value that this is set to. You can access the value of a property in an object using either object variable name dot property name or you can use square brackets and a string version of the property name. Save and refresh your browser. The property names and values are printed out. Notice how we can access an object's property either by using dot syntax or the name of the property as a string inside square brackets. Enter npc.weapon, you see the weapon. Enter npc square brackets, weapon as a string, and you see the same return value. The last loop option we'll review at this stage is the for each method of an array. We'll need an index value. Then we enter npcs.forEach. It's important to use the capital E. JavaScript is case sensitive. In the brackets we enter a function. A new way to define functions in JavaScript is to use arrow functions. Using the for each method, the callback function we create will have a parameter which is each NPC in the array in turn. To track this variable, enter NPC, then an arrow, that is equals followed by greater than, then curly brackets. We could have used this syntax, it's just the same, but you will inevitably come across arrow functions and it's important that you understand them. Then we enter a log string. We use the index value I in the string and the value of npc.weapon. This is not npc0, this is a new version of the variable npc. That will be npc0 for the first iteration, then npcs1, all the way up to npcs9. So the number we print in the string goes up, we add 1 to the variable I using the ++ increment operator. Save and over in the browser refresh. Now you have a list of NPCs showing their weapon of choice. Loops are very important in programming and you'll find many times in the course where you'll use the different methods outlined in this video. If you get confused, come back to this video and watch it again. JavaScript has a great technique for extending objects so they can easily include methods as well as properties. And we do that using classes, which is the topic of the next video. This video comes from my Udemy course, The Beginner's Guide to 3D Web Game Development with ThreeJS. Get the full course by following the link at nicklever.com/courses.